When the United States became a free nation after defeating the British in 1787, the Constitutional Congress drafted the United States Constitution and ultimately the Bill of Rights to provide freedom and certain rights to all citizens. While admirable in its original intent, not all persons were considered citizens. As a fledgling nation, born out of what could be considered anarchy against the King of England, we struggled for an identity and a purpose. Even during the presidency of George Washington and the many that followed, those that emigrated from Europe under their own free will and started families were considered citizens, yet those that were forced to leave Africa under duress were not. Black slaves were a dominant force in shaping the agricultural society in the formative years of this country, yet had no unalienable rights as called for in the Declaration of Independence. During the Constitutional Congress, at the drafting of the Constitution, the decision was made to create 3 branches of government: the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. The executive branch was made up of the president and his staff, including the president's cabinet, and was subject to rules, albeit short-sighted at the time, for the election of and the succession to the presidency. The judicial branch was our court system, including the U.S. Supreme Court and the courts down the line. The legislative branch comprised both the House of Representatives and the Senate. It was decided that 2 chambers would be created and that the 3 branches would provide checks and balances on each other. It was decided that none of the branches of government could impose power over the other, allowing for the freedom from the oppression of one part of the government imposing rule over the other. Thus, then as it is now, the President has no control over the Supreme Court, the House and Senate have no control over the President, and so on. It was at the formation of the legislative branch that the Founding Fathers came to an impasse. The Senate was easy. 2 elected officials from every state would serve in the Senate for a term of 6 years, and the officials would have alternating appointments. That was agreed on without issue. Note: the Senate was not elected by the citizens until after the passing of the 17th Amendment to the Constitution in 1913. The amendment supersedes the language of the Constitution, under which senators were elected by the state legislators. The argument erupted on how the House of Representatives would be formed. It was agreed that those states with more population would have more representation, while those with less population would have less. It was a math formula that was applied then, and to a larger extent still, works today. The argument impasse was created when the southern states, which had a large concentration of black slaves, wanted those slaves to be counted, since doing so would give those states more representation. By contrast, the northern states had far fewer slaves and thus did not want the slaves to be counted as part of the population. Those in the north argued that the southern states should not include the black slaves in the population count, since they had no right to vote or access to many of the benefits a free society would offer. This debate raged on for days. Finally, a compromise was reached and written into the Constitution. Each black person would be counted as 3/5 of a person for purposes of counting the total population of a state. It was known as the 3/5 Compromise. Thus it was written into Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution that the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every 2nd year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this Union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, and 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years, after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. but each state shall have at least one representative. And until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. The House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. Nope, that is not a misspelling. Choose is how they spelled choose. The founders of what was to become the most powerful and influential nation in modern history, therefore, not only refused to grant black slaves citizenship of their new union, but then went on to only count each black person as less than a person. This part of the Constitution is still there, yet was rendered benign by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, albeit almost 80 years later. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln issues a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, which sets a date for the freedom of more than 3 million black slaves in the United States and recasts the Civil War as a fight against slavery. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, shortly after Lincoln's inauguration as America's 16th president, he maintained that the war was about restoring the Union and not about slavery. He avoided issuing an anti-slavery proclamation immediately, despite the urging of abolitionists and radical Republicans, as well as his personal belief that slavery was morally repugnant. Instead, Lincoln chose to move cautiously until he could gain wide support from the public for such a measure. In July 1862, Lincoln informed his cabinet that he would issue an Emancipation Proclamation, but that it would exempt the so-called border states, which had slaveholders but remained loyal to the Union. His cabinet persuaded him not to make the announcement until after a Union victory. Lincoln's opportunity came following the Union win at the Battle of Antietam in September 1862. On September 22nd, the president announced that slaves in areas still in rebellion within 100 days would be free. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln issued the final Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebel states are and henceforward shall be free. The proclamation also called for the recruitment and establishment of black military units among the Union forces. An estimated 180,000 African Americans went on to serve in the Army, while another 18,000 served in the Navy. After the Emancipation Proclamation, backing the Confederacy was seen as favoring slavery. It became impossible for anti-slavery nations such as Great Britain and France, who had been friendly to the Confederacy, to get involved on behalf of the South. The proclamation also unified and strengthened Lincoln's party, the Republicans, helping them stay in power for the next 2 decades. The proclamation was a presidential order and not a law passed by Congress, so Lincoln then pushed for an anti-slavery amendment to the U.S. Constitution to ensure its permanence. With the passage of the 13th Amendment in 1865, slavery was eliminated throughout America, although blacks would face another century of struggle before they truly began to gain equal rights. Lincoln's handwritten draft of the final Emancipation Proclamation was destroyed in the Chicago Fire of 1871. Today, the original official version of the document is housed in the National Archives in Washington, D.C.